Football is a way of life.
This is football, chump. All you gotta do when a man gets the ball is tackle him. Get it? The man with the ball. Bring him down.
Football is about controlling that anger, harnessing that aggression into a team effort to achieve perfection. You fumble the football, and I will break my foot off in your John Brown hind parts. And then you will run a mile.
You block about as good as a jelly donut. You know that?
People can learn a great deal from a skillfully played football game.
What civilized person would play a game with the skin of an innocent pig?
Dad!
Let's talk about playing football.
Here's Danger Dean with the BNW in the PNW.
Welcome to the Broncos Northwest podcast. That's right, my name is Danger Dean. Welcome to another week, another episode, and it is a big one. It is a huge one because we're going to be talking about free agency, and there's a lot to discuss. We're going to get into that here in just a few minutes. However, if you'd like to reach out to the show, a few ways you can do so. Social media, we've got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Really simple for you. All three platforms at the BNW Podcast. Or if you go to the search bar that's at the top, you can type in Broncos Northwest Podcast, and I pop right up there. You can also shoot me an email at broncosnorthwestpodcast@gmail.com. And, of course, you can call in or shoot a text message to 731-4-DANGER. Just leave us a message. We'll feature you here on the show. Also want to shout out another podcast that you should be listening to if you are into pro wrestling or if you're into history. This is a really awesome one. Pro Wrestling History Nerds. Nick Gossert and Chungo actually hosting that podcast. Two extremely smart dudes on the subject, and one of my favorite wild men from right here in the Seattle area, Chungo. And then Nick Gossert, another insanely talented guy. You can check out their podcast. Again, Pro Wrestling History Nerds. Broncos Fans of Seattle page. I want to say thanks again to everybody on that page that participates in my questioning and my polling of sorts. Thanks for putting up with me. And thank you so much for lending your opinions. They're more helpful than you understand. Now, I know that Colorado and Washington are very different in the sense that Colorado's been buried under snow for the last week or so. They got hit with a crazy snowstorm if you're not familiar with anybody in Colorado, which is why I'm glad I don't live there anymore. I mean, no offense to my Colorado friends and family, but the snow, it's just too much. And then I ended up moving away from Colorado and I went to Florida, which that's the whole other opposite end of the spectrum. Too hot. Way too damn hot. So right here in Washington, where it's nice and temperate conditions, I think that fits me a little bit better because I don't envy these snow pictures that I'm seeing. Granted, Washington did get hit with a fair bit of snow back in February. However, after 2 or 3 days, it started raining again, and the rain washed away all of the snow. So that wasn't so bad. Don't like the snow. Being from Colorado, I don't like the snow. I don't like the cold. And then I also don't like the summer and the heat. I'm a very, very difficult person to please. It's like wintertime in the PNW is about as happy as I get. All right, we've got tons coming up on the show. Free agency, of course, underway, and we got a lot of news to catch up on. What happens with Von Miller, and what does the future look like for Drew Lock? Let's get into it.
Join the show, 731-4-DANGER.
It's been a busy week. Outside of free agency, I think one of the biggest news stories to break is the fact that Drew Brees is retiring after 20 years in the league, 15 years with the Saints. And what else? He's Super Bowl champion, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, 13-time Pro Bowl selection, and he's the only player with 5,000-yard seasons and the all-time leader in passing yards and completions. More importantly, the Broncos faced Brees' Saints teams 10 times and beat him 8. Yeah. Really going to miss him. Legendary career. And quarterbacks, we're going to stay on that little theme for a second, especially with free agency in the forefront. Cam Newton and the Patriots have announced that they're coming to an agreement. I thought they announced that they were amicably splitting a few months ago, or am I making that up in my head? I thought they were done city, but apparently not. I think the deal is only one more year. I'm not sure the number, but apparently that was just the start of a reign of moves that the Patriots have decided to make. And we'll have more on that here in just a few minutes.
And now, the bad news.
And maybe the news isn't so bad concerning Melvin Gordon and his DUI. Last week, Mike Kliss reporting that the DUI charges against him were dropped, completely dismissed. He ended up with a reckless driving ticket, and that's it. Now, the problem with the whole thing is TMZ picked up on the story, and they released a video of Gordon admitting that he was drunk to the officer when he was pulled over, and that he was basically worried about losing his job. Now, will that affect the league's decision concerning his possible suspension? That's the question that I have. And I'm a little bit nervous about. Although Gordon doesn't have a huge history of being in trouble, and he didn't actually get the charges. You know what I mean? So if the league is going to stick to that, then the suspension may be off the table. So to what extent is that going to affect the league's decision on his suspension? That's the only question I've got.
Free agency frenzy.
Lots to get to. Let's dive in. Benjamin Albright tweeting out that the Broncos at the beginning of free agency had about $200 million in cap space to play with. So a significant amount of money. And if you're unfamiliar with Benjamin Albright, very smart dude. He also suggested that there's plenty of room to sign Simmons to a long-term deal, flexibility with Vaughn and Shelby with free agency, and help at corner. And it doesn't look like he was too far off. The first big move the Broncos seemingly made, the Broncos signing former Washington football team cornerback Ronald Darby. His numbers, are we interested in his numbers? I think so, right? 3 years, $30 million for Ronald Darby. So, I mean, they must really like him. Darby getting the better end of the deal. And I'll be honest, I wasn't paying that much attention to the Washington football team this year. But it does fill a huge hole that the Broncos needed to address at cornerback. So, welcome to Broncos country, Ronald Darby. And he wasn't the only corner that they went after. They were also going after Chargers' Michael Davis, but he ended up choosing to stay with the team. I don't know why. The Chargers are obviously in tank rebuild mode. Their free agency is playing out like a garage sale on a summer Saturday morning. Everything's under $1, and it's got to be out of the house by noon. With that being said, they did get at least one cornerback that they were going after. And that brings us to some of the pieces that they have within the team that they need to fill. And if we think about their history with their own free agents in the past, it's not very good. Haven't treated their own players very well. Not as well as the players that they bring in from outside the organization. And it seems like that could be making a change because they've also announced that Shelby Harris is also going to get paid. Man's got his bag. Happy for him. He's a Bronco for the next 3 seasons. At least for the next 3 seasons. $27 million, 3 seasons for him. Per his Instagram page, he wrote, from 7th round pick to 2-year practice squad member, cut 6 times, 4 different teams to this. So he's definitely earned it. The best hands in the league. And this makes me excited for Shelby and for a potential changing of the guard in the front office. Because, again, like I just mentioned, this is not something that they've done in the past, and that's taking care of some of their better players before the season starts. An out-of-character off-season move for the Broncos, a great one. Is Simmons next? Yeah, not yet. If you're looking to follow any accounts on Twitter, I mentioned Benjamin Albright earlier, Mike Kliss, that's another account to watch. He's the team's mouthpiece in the media. So if they want something reported on, he's the guy they go to. Earlier in the week, he said not to rule out the possibility of Vaughn wanting to move on from the team, as well as the Broncos wanting to move on from Vaughn. Said it could make sense for an amicable split. Now, I read that, and for me, that was like the tea leaves, reading of the tea leaves. Vaughn's gone, right? Like he's putting it out there. That someone said something that potentially Vaughn's gone. Made me nervous, made me sad. I'll be quite honest with you. However, the question about Von Miller, it was answered, and he'll be a Bronco for the foreseeable future. They decided to exercise his option, guaranteeing him $18 million next season. And at this point, it seems like that decision was based on the legal matters that Von was potentially facing and that he ultimately ended up not facing. So now they'll keep him on and hopefully work out a contract that makes sense for the team in the coming months. Hopefully we don't have to go through this again next season, right? But he is going to want his money. That is the thing that we did learn from this whole thing. Von, he wants to get paid. Kliss tweeted out on Tuesday that the Broncos did offer another deal, but it did include team-friendly numbers. And Von said, nah. He also pointed out that the entire time it was Peyton's intention to keep him on the team. So he made the choice to keep him. That's a big move for the incoming general manager. It's a no-brainer. One of the best players to put on the uniform. And I can't afford another jersey, so I'm glad he's not going anywhere. It's the important things. Those things are expensive. Other Broncos free agency tidbits. A decision was made as far as where the second-round tenders are going to go. That was another big question mark. Who would get the offer and who was going to walk? And it looks like Kareem Jackson is out. The team opting not to use the second-round tender on the corner. Obviously, this move coinciding with the signing of Ronald Darby. And Kareem's a great player. He's going to get a chance, no doubt, somewhere next season. Someone's going to give him a chance, and he's going to do really well. They just couldn't afford those two huge contracts, I guess. Because they still need help at cornerback. Let's be honest here. Linebacker Alexander Johnson, the T-Rex, he led the team in tackles last season. He gets a second-round tender. Congratulations to him. Also, and I was excited to see this one as well, Timmy Pats. He's back next season, and this choice, like I said, I couldn't be happier about. He was such a huge piece of what they did in the 2020 season with Courtland Sutton's absence, and so I think it bodes well for their wide receiver room that he gets a chance to continue adding his skill set to the team. Arguably the best wide receiver room in the AFC West. I'm going to go ahead and put that down right there. I mean, I'm not going to bet money on it, but I'm going to say it. Now, unfortunately, that does mean that Phillip Lindsay, he's the odd man out, which to me, it's not that surprising. Disappointing? Extremely disappointing. Surprising? No. They've never really coveted their drafted running backs, right? Like ever. They've instead looked outside to fill the gaps that are missing. So with the news of Gordon being cleared of his charges, you would think that means no suspension and that he'll be the guy come 2021. However, that does leave an opening at running back. So if they don't fill that hole in free agency, which I don't think they're going to, expect the draft to be the next stop in running back town, which I don't know if I agree with it. Lindsay is going to be great for someone else next season, probably the Patriots. They're killing free agency right now. At the time of this recording, bolstering their tight end room, giving Cam Newton, who is back, a few more weapons. Hunter Henry, another Chargers casualty. He's now on board the Death Star with Lord Belichick, as well as Jonnu Smith from the Titans, like the two biggest tight end free agents. They're both Patriots. The Patriots also have signed about 42 other players as well, so maybe we hate the Patriots again. We'll see. Von broke Cam, so we'll see if Billy Boy can fix him. As far as the Broncos go, that leaves the team with somewhere like $26 million, $28 million left in cap space. And I can't imagine that they're done. They're still missing a huge piece of the puzzle. The quarterback, right? They haven't made any noise there whatsoever. And there's a move that's going to be made in free agency. And there's a few places to look, apparently. Daniel Jeremiah of Move the Sticks said during a media conference call that the Broncos are a team that would make sense for a possible trade partner with the Jets for Sam Darnold. I'm wondering if you got that same reaction that I did. I saw that tweet and all the skin fell off my body. He was one of their desired quarterbacks in his draft, but I feel like that's basically the equivalent of having two Drew Locks. Maybe it might make sense for them, but not for me. Pass, please. There was also talk about the team being interested in draft prospect Trey Lance of North Dakota State, quarterback. George Payton and Denver's quarterbacks coach Mike Shula attended his pro day last week, sparking conversations questioning the interest the Broncos may have in moving up in the draft. Again, no. Like, please don't let that be a thing. There's typically a level of BSing going on when it comes to the draft and who's interested in whom, and I really hope that this is one of those instances. I could pull my hair out if they use that first-round pick for a quarterback. I don't want to, but I will. And I go back to Benjamin Albright. Again, great follow, especially during such an active time like free agency. He tweeted out that the Broncos haven't made any significant decisions yet concerning the quarterback position, and that they're not shopping lock. So when it comes to the team and their choice at quarterback, I don't feel like the team is going to go and trade for a Watson or a Russell. Watson himself, he's in some legal trouble. That's just beginning to surface over the last few days. A woman is accusing him of sexual assault, which he's obviously denying. And I don't know if the Broncos are going to get themselves involved in a situation like that, especially coming off of the potential threat that Von Miller and his legal troubles seem to be a threat. Unfortunate timing, but still serious enough to take into consideration. I just have this feeling. It's just a feeling that Locke is going to be the guy. The question is, who are they going to bring in as competition? That's where this list starts to get a little barren, especially over the last few days, free agency picking the bones, so to speak. The guys that I wanted to see come in as competition. And again, competition is intended to elevate, not decimate. Jacoby Brissett, he's signed on with the Dolphins. He's no longer an option. Tyrod Taylor, another name I liked, he went to the Texans. A situation worth keeping an eye on, especially for those who want Watson in a Denver uniform next season. Some other free agents that have signed on with other teams, Andy Dalton, who I didn't want to see in Denver anyways, he's now a Chicago Bear, which is very interesting because the Chicago Bears were pursuing Russell Wilson and apparently offered up a lot for him, only to be rejected. So don't expect Russell Wilson to be signing anywhere else other than Seattle. And as you can imagine, the options of quarterback are starting to dwindle and dwindle fast. Alex Smith, Mitch Trubisky. Now I'm all of a sudden nervous about how they're going to handle the quarterback situation. My biggest fear is that they're thinking draft. And even worse, first round. There has to be a better option than that. There just has to be. I just don't trust the front office with the draft, especially when it comes to a quarterback that they're going to have to develop. Hell, going back to Darnold, maybe he would be a good fit here. As long as there's no talk of making him the guy moving forward. Remember, competition doesn't mean replacement. I go back to pulling out my poor hair.
If you happen to see Tim Tebow, can you ask him to unblock Danger Dean on Twitter? Tell him he didn't mean it, and he'll never say it again. It's the Broncos Northwest Podcast.
Last week, I asked you, what would be the bigger free agency move, cutting Vaughn or replacing Locke with looming free agency? And I feel like the bigger move would be to replace Locke. Just because that changes the entire direction of the team and what they have planned. Where losing Vaughn would definitely suck. It would sting. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it wouldn't. Luckily, we don't have to feel that here in Broncos country. He's sticking around. But it would be something that would be easier. And I use that term loosely to patch up then who's under center. So replacing Locke would mean that you've signed a Deshaun Watson or a Russell Wilson. You're saying that you're bringing in somebody huge. So I feel that if you were to replace Drew Lock, that's the bigger free agency move. How did you feel about it? Kyle disagreed. He said cutting Vaughn. He's still very much one of the most dominant defensive players in the league, and Locke is a mediocre quarterback who hasn't learned to read an NFL defense at a consistent level, which is why I feel it would be the bigger move to replace Drew Lock. That means you're giving the team a whole new upgrade, a facelift, if you will. Peter said Vaughn's production has diminished since Super Bowl 50. Renegotiate his contract or trade him. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And then it goes all over the place here. I'm not sure exactly where some of you were going. Trade him and our number one for a quarterback. No. Jeff said, if I had to choose, replace Locke. Again, not sold on him 100%, which I think kind of falls into what I was saying. If you replace Drew Lock, this team changes completely. So I feel like that makes it the bigger move. Michael said, oh man, I think replacing Locke for sure. Okay, he agrees. If we replace Locke, it's got to be for someone who's been playing better. And I've said it a million times, it's a quarterback-driven league now. And he's absolutely right. And it's still a possibility. Of course, we know Vaughn's future with the team has been answered. The question at least in the short term has been answered. He's going to be around at least for the next season. So now that turns the focus on the quarterback position. What are they doing with Drew Lock? Keeping him around, or are they trading him? A move no doubt will be answered here in the next few weeks, at least leading up to the draft. Have your opinion heard on next week's episode. It's Assignment Broncos Country time. In your opinion, what is the biggest free agency move so far? Perhaps the most shocking. As always, you can share your opinions at the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all at the BNW Podcast. Shoot your email to broncosnorthwestpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, the phone number here, 731-4-DANGER. 731, the number 4, DANGER. Call, text in, leave a message, and your opinion will be featured right here on the show. Thank you so much for hanging out. It's the Broncos Northwest Podcast. I'm your host, Danger Dean. Thank you so much for hanging out. Until next time, bye.